Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for watching. Tonight, we'll bring you the latest out of the provincial pre-budget talks in Windsor today. Plus, local advocates are speaking out about Windsor's all-white police board. Some say it shows a disconnect from diverse communities. The local Chinese community marks the year of the rabbit, but a tragic shooting in California during Lunar New Year celebrations has Asian Americans rattled and grieving. And Flair Airlines will no longer be flying from Windsor to Montreal, but some customers were not notified about the cancellations. Let's begin tonight with Windsor's mayor pushing for a major transformation for the city's East End. It involves connecting Lozon Parkway to Highway 401, and it needs $100 million from the Ontario government to do it. Dale Molnar has more from the provincial pre-budget talks today in the city.
As the Gordie Howe Bridge takes shape in the West End, Windsor's mayor is trying to ensure local industries are connected to the crossing. Today, he asked the province for a $100 million investment to pay for a new highway interchange hooking up Lozon Parkway to Highway 401. It would also allow for the creation of a new industrial park in the East End.
Now, you can go up to 1,000 acres if City Council wanted to go that big. So there's variations between, say a few hundred acres to 1,000 acres of land. In fact, when constructed, this industrial park will be the closest industrial park to the U.S.-Canada border on the Canadian side.
He says that will also allow the city to establish a better link to the new hospital, which is right down the road on County Road 42.
The mayor doesn't expect the province to earmark that money for this year's budget. He says this is about a 5-year plan.
To fully maximize the value of that investment, we would need assurances that the province would complete the highway interchange in tandem with our construction activities.
The mayor says it'll cost local taxpayers about $100 million for the extension of Lozon Parkway, in addition to what he's asking for from the province.
I wanted to ask you, what is the disparity between pay rate for DSWs and PSWs?
Meanwhile, healthcare funding was a major topic of concern amongst many of the groups making submissions. The NDP are once again voicing concerns about the province using private clinics to deliver some services.
Then with wage restraint laws such as Bill 124 have created this crisis that we're now encountering where ERs are closing. There's a surgical backlog that people are waiting a ridiculous amount of time.
MPP Lisa Gretzky says the government isn't doing enough to keep nurses from going stateside for work and should not be going to court to fight for Bill 124.
While this government is talking about expanding into the private for-profit healthcare, saying we need to do that in order to somehow shore up public healthcare, they are actually taking nurses in publicly funded healthcare to court in order to suppress their wages.
Conservative MPP Andrew Dowie says the province isn't planning to do anything with private clinics that hasn't already been done before.
Our doctors are private corporations. We have our in vitro fertilization clinic, a private corporation.
The provincial committee will travel to the town of Essex tomorrow. The MPPs will continue to gather input on the provincial budget until February the 10th. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
The Windsor Police Services Board is facing more criticism over its lack of diversity. This comes after a recent appointment to the Oversight Board. One advocate says an all-white board membership shows how disconnected it is from the city's diverse population.
A giant group of white people is just not capable of taking care of all the minorities in the city without help and guidance from the actual minorities that live within the city. The city should take more responsibility, and instead of just asking for applicants, they should specifically seek out people, especially from the Black and Indigenous community, like representatives from those communities.
The police board does not direct operations. Instead, it hires and fires chiefs and deputy chiefs and oversees policy implementation. Last week, Sophia Chisholm was sworn in as the newest Windsor board member. Council made her its public appointee. That prompted some to say that it was a missed opportunity to add some diversity. The Comprehensive Ontario Police Services Act says all municipal boards should be representative of the local population's diversity. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkins is still chair of the board, and when we asked him about this, he highlighted 2 female members, including Councillor Joanne Geniak. Here's part of a statement he sent CBC News. Quote, "The role of the board is not to direct police operations in any way, shape, or form. So to suggest that board members be appointed on the basis of a specific agenda or operational prerogative would set a dangerous precedent for any police service board."
We would hope that the folks that are setting the policy would be able to set what I think is the proper tone for police services. We're not talking about operational, kind of directives or anything like that, but setting the tone. What exactly do we mean when we talk about, kind of effective, effective police?
Police often interact with marginalized, vulnerable, and racialized people. Another reason Jones says it's important to have diversity in policing, including at the board level. CBC News reached out to Sophia Chisholm for a comment, but we have not received a response. The city tells CBC News 48 people applied to be on the board. It is the year of the rabbit, bringing with it longevity, peace, and prosperity. Lunar New Year celebrations kicked off yesterday at Devonshire Mall. We went to check out the sights and sounds of the cultural celebration.
We have been doing the celebration for this year is the 6th time at Devonshire Mall. So because of the pandemic, last couple years we didn't do it, but now we are so glad to come back again. We are going to showcase our arts and culture with performances, and also we set up stations to showcase calligraphy and the Chinese zodiac and New Year snacks and tea and so on, and also the arts and craft children's corner.
It's very important to celebrate the New Year for the Chinese people, and one main reason is in the New Year, everybody in the family will come home, get together, have a New Year dinner, and have a celebration on the New Year Day. According to Zodiac, for this year, the Year of Rabbit will bring us longevity, peace, and prosperity. And also 2023 is a year of hope.
Meanwhile, a tragedy disrupted celebrations elsewhere. Authorities are searching for a motive in the mass shooting at a dance hall near Los Angeles on Saturday. 11 people died and several were injured after a gunman opened fire during Lunar New Year celebrations. A makeshift memorial has been set up outside the venue. The 72-year-old suspect was found dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound on Sunday. Police say he tried to attack a second dance hall nearby, but a man disarmed him before he fled the scene. Authorities say he may have been a patron of the first dance hall he targeted, which is a popular local spot in the older Asian American community. The attack is the deadliest in the U.S. since the school shootings in Uvalde, Texas in May. There was a major step forward for some residential school survivors and their families over the weekend. The federal government has agreed to pay almost $3 billion in reparations for the loss of language and culture brought on by residential schools. Deanna Sumanek-Johnson has the details.
For former Chief Shane Godfredson, it's a moment to reflect and celebrate.
Very humbled and honored that we come to this resolution.
A $2.8 billion settlement between the federal government and 325 First Nations. 10 years after he first launched a class action lawsuit seeking reparations for harms done by Canada's residential school system.
It just goes to show, too, as First Nations governments, when we work together, great things can happen.
The announcement is actually the second settlement in the Godfredson case. This one provides reparations for the loss of language and culture as a result of residential schools.
What it can do is help address the collective harm caused by Canada's past, a deeply colonial one.
A federal court still has to approve the new settlement. Once it does, an initial lump sum payment of $200,000 will be made to each of the 325 First Nations. $2.8 billion will be placed in a trust fund that will operate for 20 years. The fund will be governed by a board of 9 Indigenous directors. Still, the work ahead won't be easy, says this Indigenous languages expert.
At the moment, there is not one university in Canada in which a First Nations or an Indigenous language teacher can gain credentials and gain the knowledge they need to be able to teach. There needs to be a real organized way of being able to support the people with the proper kind of resources that are needed to do the work.
But for now, she says, this is mostly good news for Indigenous people, a view shared by Shane Godfredson.
Now it's our time to start turning, our way of life around to be, learn our languages and our culture. So exciting times, definitely.
A chance to recover cultures once stripped away. Deanna Sumanak-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
We turn now to more evidence of the healthcare crisis. Almost 12,000 children are on surgery wait lists across Ontario, and about half of them have been on the wait list longer than clinically recommended. It's a problem hospital officials are saying they need provincial help to solve. They're asking for major investments in staffing to deal with the backlog from the recent spike in flu and respiratory cases that forced a tidal wave of canceled surgeries. And a new study says patients are not turning to virtual care as a substitute for in-person doctor visits.
Well, it was really important to have a look because we have pivoted to a hybrid model of care. The pandemic really forced virtual care on doctors who wanted to maintain contact with their patients when we were told not to circulate in public as readily. And so doctors reached out via email and telephone calls and screen visits, virtual visits. And so what we know now is that the unprecedented strain that we are experiencing in the emergency departments was not as a result of this shift of patients accessing their family doctors virtually, which is an important finding.
The study was conducted by the Ontario Medical Association. It looked at the number of virtual visits patients had with family doctors versus the number of times those same patients visited emergency departments. To the East Coast now, where dozens of people turned up to a protest in Sydney, Nova Scotia, expressing concerns about the state of the province's healthcare system. Yesterday's rally comes in the wake of two recent deaths revolving around visits to ERs in Nova Scotia. It put a spotlight on shortfalls in an overburdened healthcare system, which the provinces are hoping will be addressed with more funding from the federal government. And as Marina von Stackelberg reports, a deal on that front could be coming soon.
Healthcare horror stories, from ER closures to ballooning waitlists for procedures, and recently 2 Nova Scotia patients who died waiting for care. Then there's descriptions from doctors in emergency department rooms like this.
Paramedics are waiting with their patients strapped to stretchers. They stretch the entire length of the emergency department. I can hear them crying. I can hear the patients yelling. I can hear them vomiting. They're suffering.
For years, the provinces and territories have demanded the federal government give them more money for their healthcare systems. They want a significant increase from $42 billion to $70 billion a year. Now a deal may be coming. The reason?
Public opinion.
On CBC's Rosemary Barton Live, New Brunswick's premier says he thinks public pressure is having a big impact.
This has been a long process that has really ramped up in the last several weeks, so that is good news. And I am optimistic that we will strike a deal in February.
Ottawa says it will only give the provinces more money if they meet specific goals, like reducing operation backlogs and improving primary and mental health care. Some provinces have said they want the money with no strings attached. Ottawa has signaled a deal is coming, but warns even a cash injection won't be an immediate cure-all.
Even if there's an agreement and federal support for provinces financially increases, to train a radiology technician, a nurse, a family doctor, it's not going to happen overnight.
Long-term challenges for a medical system that needs help now.
It's demoralizing, it's frustrating, and the worst part is that people are suffering.
There is a time crunch to get a deal done. The federal government's spring budget is right around the corner, and it wants to make sure that budget reflects any new healthcare spending. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Flair Airlines is canceling flight services from Windsor to Montreal. The bi-weekly flights will no longer be in the air after February 6th. One Windsor customer who booked flights for after that time says he was confused when he realized his flight no longer existed. He told CBC he had not been informed the flight had been canceled. A Flair spokesperson tells CBC the flights are canceled for now, and anyone who booked a flight will receive a full refund. Flair launched the Windsor-Montreal route less than a year ago. CEO of the Windsor International Airport says they plan to announce a new route with Flair in the coming weeks. Live look outside at the Ambassador Bridge there. If you enjoyed the snow that we got over the weekend, we do have some more flurries expected for tonight, plus a special weather statement in effect for Wednesday, and it tells us that we're expecting major snowfall. Colette Kennedy will be here after the break with a full weather breakdown. Stay with us. Canadians know that the damage from post-tropical storm Fiona was bad, but seeing is believing. New drone footage reveals the extent of the damage in Prince Edward Island. The data gathered from it could help residents and government officials protect the shoreline in the future. Nancy Russell explains.
Andy McDonald and Luke Meloche packed up their drones here at the Canadian Centre for Climate Change and Adaptation and hit the road as soon as they could after Fiona. What they saw from the drone was widespread damage to PEI's coastline.
It was kind of heart-wrenching. You'd show up to places, there'd be empty foundations, you'd be driving along the coast and you'd see the wreckage of someone's house washed up. There'd be huge stretches of coastal road where we'd drive before, and now there's no road.
Crews from the UPEI Climate Lab have been monitoring PEI's coastline since 2016 and have never seen erosion like this.
And in that time, the largest losses we've seen, which were very rare, were in the 5-meter loss areas. But after this storm, we've seen areas with more than 10 meters lost, sustained over an area which we've never seen before, and which we've never seen in the historical records either. So yeah, just very shocking.
The drone crew made it to more than 25 locations around PEI. They usually monitor more than 100, so there will be more flights to come in the spring. And they expect damage from Fiona is going to change their work moving forward.
More people are going to be interested. They'll see that, hey, this area was hit really hard. Can you add somewhere there? And hopefully we can oblige with that.
The information the UPEI crew is gathering will be shared with the provincial government. It is used to make decisions about coastal development and preparing for climate change.
I think that as an island made of sandstone, figuring out a way to protect our coastlines is important.
For now, the drone crew will spend the winter doing a deep dive into the data they gathered in 2022, including the damage from Fiona. Nancy Russell, CBC News, St. Peters Bay.
Colette Kennedy is with us now for a look at our local weather forecast. And Colette, we got some snow over the weekend, bit of a winter wonderland, and more to come, it looks like.
Yeah, the dusting, a little more than a dusting of snow. You know, that's kind of, we'll think of that as System 1. And then there's System 2 going through tonight, which I think is only just going to really be flurries for southwestern Ontario. It's number 3 that I think we all need to stand up and pay attention to. I know I am, and I'll try and give you the best information I can as it gets closer. But that's really going to be for Wednesday. And so we'll get into that here in a moment. But just looking even at the temperatures, just at the freezing mark for Goderich and Sarnia and for Windsor, and barely below it for Chatham, Kent through London and Kitchener. And this mild winter that we've been experiencing really plays into the situation as we get these storm systems coming through along the storm track, because when we get into that mixing with rain or even ice, then it does keep the snow accumulations down. This next one, it looks like we're going to spend quite a bit of time in the cold sector. So as long as it keeps on track with that, that's why there'll be more significant amounts through here. The wind's a little bit gusty the last hour or so, and that'll be kind of the case through the overnight to early tomorrow morning as this clipper goes through. But anything that would be of any more significance in terms of travel conditions or accumulations are going to be closer to Georgian Bay. There is a winter weather travel advisory that's been issued there, kind of for what's coming, not just tonight, but really into tomorrow morning. There it is as it goes through. That kind of weakens out and then becomes more a lake effect to the south side of the lower Great Lakes. Here's what we're going to focus on, though, is what's to come. So Wednesday morning, probably just starting as some flurries or a little bit of light snow. Still could have an impact on the road, certainly on Wednesday morning. But then it intensifies and it's going to fill in. And watching this track is so crucial. I do think we'll be on the lesser end in terms of what's going to be happening elsewhere in the province in terms of the accumulations, but it's looking like we have that potential to be in that 10 centimeter range. And as it gets closer, these are some of the hazards because with blowing snow, reduced visibility too. As it gets closer, I'll be able to fine tune that a little more. So come back, meet me here tomorrow night, and we'll look at what the latest model runs are, and I'll give you an even better idea. So more likely that we're around that 10, but then you move eastward, it becomes 10 to 20, and then 20 plus, like Eastern Ontario, probably looking at Kingston to maybe Ottawa, Cornwall, 30 centimeters through that region. Tonight, a cooler one, feeling like we should have a -2 there, by the way, feeling like -10. And then as we look ahead here in terms of temperatures, this is going to really matter on Wednesday. Are we at that 1 degree? Are we right at freezing and staying in the track with that colder air?
Well, we will be sure to check back in with you tomorrow, Colette.
I'll be here.
Thanks so much. When we come back, a 99-year-old Quebec woman has been threatened with criminal charges if she fails to appear for jury duty. We'll bring you that story after the break. The family of a 99-year-old Montreal woman wants answers after she received a notice for jury duty and a follow-up saying she could face legal action if she doesn't show up at court. Valeria Corey-Minocchio has more.
Edward Ritchuk says the situation is upsetting and inconvenient. His 99-year-old mother-in-law, Marian Lenko, is in a long-term care home, bedridden, hard of hearing, and unable to hold a conversation. Still, she was summoned for jury duty.
I thought it was a joke.
The notice was originally sent to Lenko's old address in Kirkland. When Ritchuk received it in December, it detailed the steps to apply for an exemption. He emailed Lenko's son, who lives in Florida and is legally responsible for her. But Ritchuk says her son did not respond to the summons or fill out the exemption form.
Well, until I got the last letter, it was sort of like, well, that's not a very important deal. I mean, you know, there's no way she's going to go as a jurist.
This week, Ritchuk received another notice saying his mother-in-law could be fined or thrown in jail if she doesn't appear at the Montreal courthouse on January 31st.
I can't believe that they did not do any checking and that they automatically said you can be liable.
In a statement, Quebec's Justice Ministry says prospective jurors are randomly selected. It adds that prospective jurors over 65 who cannot request an exemption via email can call the office of the sheriff. The ministry is encouraging Ritchuk to do that.
For the Bureau des Infractions et Amendes, press 1. For the Registre.
But Ritchuk says he tried and didn't get through to anyone.
That's pretty tough medicine for a 99-year-old woman who's bedridden, hard of hearing. It's shameful.
Meanwhile, this lawyer says there should be a line reserved for people to call and explain their situation.
If the province feels free to notify anybody, regardless of their age or health, and just leave it to them to explain themselves, they should at least provide the resources for some people to make an initial phone call and get a real service on the phone that would guide them in the right direction.
For Ritchuk, he says he's unsure what to do next. Valeria Corey-Minocchio, CBC News, Montreal.
That is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, you can always go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.